I found an elderly couple abandoned on the street at midnight. Our daughter left us here. An engine tore down the dirt road in the dead of night, and my dogs sprang up barking as one. I grabbed the flashlight, jammed my boots on any which way, and stepped into the dark with my heart pounding. A few yards from the gate, I saw a hunched man with a cane, trying to steady a woman who was staggering and crying. I raised the light slowly so I wouldn't startle them, and stopped at a respectful distance. "What happened to you two? Why are you out here in the middle of the road at this hour?" I asked, tense. The man took a breath and squeezed the cane so hard his hand shook. "Our daughter and her husband, they dumped us here by force and drove off without saying a word, without looking back," he said, shattered. The woman tried to speak, but the sobs caught in her chest. "I live just up ahead in a cabin. My name's Ronald. I can help. Let's get out of this darkness, please," I said, careful. She looked at me through her tears and nodded. "Any place that isn't this road will do," he murmured, exhausted. I tilted the flashlight toward the ground and walked in front to light up the rocks. "Hold on to my arm. Easy now, no rush," I said, trying to calm them. "I'm Sean, and this is Melissa," the man answered, still trembling. "Nice to meet you. I'm Ronald. The house is right there. We'll be there in a minute. My dogs just make noise," I said, trying to sound welcoming. The dogs growled as we passed through the gate. I whistled them down and opened the cabin door. "Come in, please, have a seat," I said, hurried but gentle. I went to the stove, lit the burner, and set up a basin with warm water while they settled in and tried to stop shaking. I came over with the basin. "Melissa, I'm going to raise your legs a bit to help your breathing settle," I explained softly. She agreed. I adjusted the chair and offered her water. "I have high blood pressure. When I get scared, it spikes," Melissa whispered, rattled. "We'll take care of that now. Drink a little more," I answered, steady and warm. Sean stared into nothing, eyes lost. "Sean, take it easy. You're safe here," I said in a low voice. "Safe is a word I haven't heard in a long time," he replied, bitter. I draped a blanket over both their shoulders and left only the dim kitchen light on. "Do you want to tell me what happened?" I asked without pressing. "Not now, please," Melissa mumbled, spent. "All right. Tonight you don't have to explain anything," I said, respectful. I made a simple tea and set it beside them, showed them where the bathroom and water were. I said I sleep on the living room couch and would keep an eye out. "Sorry for the trouble, sir," Sean muttered, embarrassed. "The only trouble is seeing folks in the dark without help. The rest we can handle," I replied, sincere. The night kept us company. I dozed under a throw, and when morning came, I got up, helped Melissa sit in the kitchen chair again, filled 3 glasses of water, and came closer. "I'm not going to push, but when you're ready, I'm here to hear what happened last night," I said, offering shelter. "We're better now, and we trust you. We'll tell you what happened." Sean took a deep breath, resolved. He set the cane in the corner, looked at the table, and began. "Last night, our daughter Deborah called saying she had a surprise. Some night outing," he said, trying to hold it together. "She asked us to be ready in the middle of the night," Melissa added, twisting her fingers, nervous. "Did that strike you as odd?" I asked, cautious. "It did, but she's our daughter," Sean answered, pain and loyalty mixed. Sean said that in the car, Deborah stayed silent the whole way, staring out the window. "And her husband?" I asked, suspicious. "Driving with a stone face, never checking the rear view, like we were sacks of potatoes." Sean scowled, hurt. I felt a bad cold inside. Melissa shook her head, frightened. After a while, Sean said the car stopped suddenly in the middle of a deserted road. "And then?" I asked, stomach turned to ice. I asked what they were doing out there, but there was no time. "Her husband, Seth, opened the door and yanked me by the arm, ripped my cane away," he answered, humiliated. "She did the same to me, yelling for me to get out now," Melissa said, wounded. "What exactly did she say?" I asked, indignant. "Here, you won't be anyone's problem," Melissa repeated, spitting the sentence like a shard. Sean lowered his head, his hand gripping his knee. Seth shoved us both onto the gravel, threw my cane far, and got back in the car, he said, crushed. No explanation? I asked, incredulous. Nothing, just dust and the sound of the engine fading, Sean replied flat. Melissa started crying again, this time with a restrained fury. We stood there hearing animals in the brush and the wind, she said, hurting. You can report this, you know that, I said firmly. She's our only child, Ronald. We can't do that. It hurts more than any rock. Sean shook his head, torn. All right, I respect that, I answered, holding myself in check. Just don't leave us alone. Melissa leaned her forehead on the table, pleading. I won't, I promise. You can stay here as long as you need, I said, committed. They fell asleep on the couch, exhausted, holding hands, and I sat on the edge of a chair, looking out the window. When they opened their eyes late in the afternoon, Sean got up, determined. We want to go home, he said, his voice rough. I got the two of them into the pickup and drove slow, dust rising in the mirror. Do you think everything's the way we left it? Melissa asked, anxious. I don't know, but if it isn't, we'll handle it, I replied, honest. She nodded, tapping her fingers on her knee, quiet. When I turned the corner, the world shattered into silence. The lot fenced off, the house reduced to rubble, roof torn off, walls collapsed, beams exposed, doors and windows smashed, heavy machines parked on top. In the middle of the debris, a dented pot, a cracked picture frame, dirty clothes. Sean let out a hoarse groan, like his chest had taken a punch, and Melissa covered her mouth with both hands. A man with a radio, a wrinkled uniform, and a bored face walked up to the gate. I'm security here. No one comes in, he said, bureaucratic. They live here. This was their house, I said, trying to breathe. Orders are orders. I can't let you in, the guard repeated, evasive. Sean tried to move forward on his cane, but his legs buckled and I caught him by the arm. He moved closer to the guard. This is my life, man. Open this gate, he pleaded, desperate. I just work here. That's not up to me, the guard said, looking away, uncomfortable. Melissa lost her breath, clutching her chest, and I turned to the guard. At least let us know who authorized this mess, I asked, irritated. I don't know. I was just told to stay here and keep everyone out, the guard answered, scratching his neck, awkward. The bare minimum is respect. Look at the state these folks are in, I said, indignant. Suddenly, a woman appeared on the other side of the fence, face red from running, fingers hooked in the wire, panting. I'm Skylar, their neighbor and friend, she said, distressed. Skylar? Sean lifted his head, hopeful. This morning, the machines knocked everything down. I yelled, tried to stop them. No one listened. She nodded, outraged. Skylar went on, eyes brimming and anger clean and bright. I called a bunch of people. No one wanted to get involved, she said, frustrated. I'm Ronald. I just brought them. I found them in the middle of the night, dumped on the road. I said, steady. So you're the one who saved them. Thank you. Skylar looked at me, surprised and grateful. I pulled out my phone and started filming the gate, the debris and their condition. Without really planning it, the decision came out as naturally as protecting what you love. They can stay with me. My house has room, Skylar said, resolute. I'll split my time, half the day out at the ranch, half in town to help, I replied, committed. You've done so much already, Ronald. You don't have to, Sean tried to protest, ashamed. This isn't a favor. It's justice, I answered with a gesture, certain. The next day I woke early and went back into town to meet the three of them. Together we went to a building at City Hall. Let's go to the building department, I said, controlled. Today we're leaving with an answer, Sean agreed, firm. At the counter, an attendant greeted us with trained politeness. I'm with the building department. How can I help? He said, professional. They knocked down Mr. Sean and Ms. Melissa's house without notice. We want to know who authorized it. I stepped forward, direct. The clerk nodded seriously and put his hand on the keyboard. "Give me the lot number or some reference," he asked, focused. "I've got it here, in my cane," Sean answered, pulling out a crumpled slip and handing it over. The man typed, frowned at the screen. "There's no demolition or construction permit on file for that parcel," he said, careful. "What do you mean?" Melissa's eyes went wide, shocked. "No permit on file, ma'am," the clerk repeated, showing the screen. A mix of relief and anger hit me. "Then it was irregular," I said, swallowing hard. "I can't say that officially. What I can do is open a case for investigation," he said, raising a hand. "And how long does that take?" Sean asked, impatient. "It usually takes quite a while," the clerk replied, rubbing his chin, candid. "Can I photograph the section showing that?" I raised my phone, asking permission. "You can, but no personal data, okay?" He thought for a second and agreed, attentive. I framed the "no permit on file" part and snapped a photo. The clerk jotted down a number and wrote it on a slip. "That's your case number when you open it. Keep it," he said, formal. Outside, under the awning, anger threatening to spill from our eyes. "At least we've got a start," I said, trying to hold it together. "A start is little to people who lost their home." Sean tapped his cane on the ground, hurting. "We can't lose our heads now." Melissa gripped my hand, asking for calm. Skylar, who had listened without a word, touched my shoulder. "I know a lawyer. His name's Thomas. He's solid and very good," she suggested, confident. "Are you willing to talk to Thomas?" I looked at them, searching for a yes. "If it's to set our lives straight, I'll do anything," Sean answered, firm. We all headed to an office in an old building, knocked, and a man with a quiet voice opened the door and shook hands firmly. "I'm Ronald, this is Sean, and this is Melissa, and this is Skylar, their neighbor and friend," I said, introducing everyone. "I'm Thomas. How can I help?" He invited us to sit, attentive. I told him how I'd found them in the middle of the night, about the visit to the site, the guard's words, and the check at the building department. Thomas listened without interrupting, taking notes in tight handwriting. "First thing is to protect what's yours on paper," he said, to the point. "What can we do right now?" Sean leaned forward, anxious. "I'll file requests to copy everything that touched the parcel and the work. I'll notify whoever's messing with it, and I'll ask for recognition of your possession without argument." Thomas spread his hands, explaining. "Will that bring trouble to our daughter?" Melissa lifted her eyes, still wary. "We'll work with the house, the documents, the land. If you don't want to push anything else right now, we'll focus on that," Thomas answered, careful. I looked at Sean and Melissa, letting them decide. "Good. No criminal complaint," Sean said, resolute. "She's our only daughter. We don't want the police after her," Melissa added, pained. "Understood. I'll need signatures and a written account of the demolition," Thomas nodded, practical. "I'll sign as a witness. I saw the machines tearing everything down." Skylar stepped up, voice firm. He gathered documents, stamped a paper, and explained our next steps. "Keep every photo, every video, every slip. Anyone who talks to you about the job, write it down. I'll call as soon as I have an answer," he instructed, precise. When we said our goodbyes, Sean shook Thomas's hand. "Thank you for taking our case," he said, moved. "This isn't charity, it's justice," Thomas replied, serious. "May this be resolved without more pain." Melissa wiped her eyes, hopeful. I took the couple back to Skylar's in the evening, helped set the table, and left food ready. At the door, before I left, Sean caught my arm. "Ronald, you were the hand that showed up when we needed it most," he said, grateful. "Come back tomorrow, please," Melissa added, calmer than in the morning. "I will, and I'll keep coming back until you're standing on your own ground again," I said, promising. I drove back with night falling, head full of noise and promises. I parked the pickup at my ranch gate and heard the dogs coming to greet me. 2 days later, the phone rang early and I heard Thomas's voice. "I've set up a meeting with Deborah and Seth to try to resolve this civilly," he said, measured. "We'll be there, Thomas." "You can confirm," I answered, decided. I explained to Sean and Melissa that the meeting would be that day. "What does resolve this civilly mean?" Sean tightened his grip on the cane, suspicious. "It means they're going to listen, and we're going to demand back what's yours, with Thomas at our side," I replied, firm. "I don't want to fight. I just want our house back." Melissa drew a deep breath, wounded. Later, we arrived at Thomas's office quietly. "Wait here, they'll be here any minute." Thomas greeted us and spoke softly, in control. "Whatever happens, I'm on your side," Skylar whispered, solid. The door opened, and Deborah and Seth walked in. I'd never seen them, but somehow I recognized at once Deborah's lifted chin, her cold eyes sliding over her parents like they were strangers. Seth came in rigid, throwing his weight into the room. Deborah pulled out a chair and sat directly across from me with a contempt you could touch. "Deborah," Sean murmured, not lifting his gaze. "Let's be quick." "I've got another appointment," she answered, icy. Seth tossed a thick stack of papers onto the table and jabbed a finger at the top one. "Here's the power of attorney, full powers granting Deborah authority over the house, the land, everything," he announced, taunting. "Where did this come from?" I craned my neck, indignant. Sean took the paper with trembling hands and stared at the letters like he was looking at a stranger. "I never signed anything like this," he said, offended. "You must be forgetting things, Dad." Deborah let out a dry, mocking laugh. "Calm down, please. Let's talk like adults." Melissa raised a hand, distressed. "Old age makes everything fuzzy, right? You sign and then don't even remember." Seth folded his arms and sneered, poisonous. "Don't talk like that. You know exactly what you're doing." I leaned forward in my chair and shot back, cutting across him. "We're doing what should have been done a long time ago." Deborah lifted her chin even higher, frigid. The air snapped when Sean stood and thumped the cane on the floor. "I want basic respect," he demanded, firm. "You never learned to give space, always meddling where you're no longer welcome," Deborah fired back, sharp. "You dumped them in the dark, in the middle of the road." I raised a hand between them and said, outraged, "Stay out of what's none of your business." Seth flushed red, stepped forward and shoved me by the shoulder, aggressive. Then, angry, he kicked Sean's cane, and Sean lost his balance and almost fell backward. "Don't do that!" Melissa cried out, hand to her chest, stumbling, panicked. "That's cowardice, you know it!" I grabbed Sean by the arm and put my body between him and Seth, staring him down. "Cowardice is pity for people who get in the way." Seth took another half step and spoke through clenched teeth, cruel. "This document is going to be challenged, and we'll settle this in court." Thomas moved beside the table, voice low but firm, trying to keep things from boiling over. "Settle it wherever you want. The house was falling apart anyway." Deborah shrugged, disdainful. "Rotten is what you're doing to us." Sean pointed at her, hurt. "Are we done?" Deborah yanked the power of attorney back, stuffed it into the folder, and stood like she didn't plan on wasting a second more. "This isn't over. Not by a long shot," Thomas replied, measuring his words. "If you want a war, you'll get one." Seth threw over his shoulder as he opened the door, threatening. I walked out with my stomach churning, Melissa supported by me and Skylar. "I almost went down, Ronald." Sean looked at me with a mix of shame and fury. "He won't lay a hand on you again," I answered, firm. I never imagined she could look her own mother in the face and say that. Skylar spat the words, shocked. That night, after dropping the three of them at Skylar's, I drove back with my headlights slicing through the dust and parked at my ranch gate. I got out of the pickup, ran my hand along the fence and felt the wire cut. The flashlight beam caught, snagged on the wire, a note scribbled in a hard hand. "Mind your own business." "So it's with me now," I said to myself, spitting the words slowly. The next day, I went back to Skylar's and told them about the note. They're coming after you because of us. Melissa turned pale, distressed. They won't shut us up. Sean tapped his cane on the floor without force, stubborn. You're not going anywhere alone. Skylar gripped my arm, protective. A few days later, after my head burned from thinking of a way forward, I told the three of them we were going back to Thomas's office. We walked in with our hearts in our throats, and Thomas met us standing, not smiling, wearing the bored look of someone pulled away from something more important. I don't know anything about your case, he said, cold. What do you mean you don't? Here's the lot number, here's the case ticket. You gave it to me yourself. I thought I'd misheard and repeated slowly, hurting. In my world, whoever pays more calls the shots, and you need to leave. Thomas pointed to the door with a short, icy gesture, dismissive. Silence swallowed us for a second that felt like an hour. Scumbag! Sean leaned on the desk, disgusted. I can't believe he sold us out for money. Melissa pressed her back to the wall, trying to breathe. I brought you here. This is on me, Skylar whispered to me, deflated. It isn't on you. It's on the one who sold himself. I pulled Skylar to the side and spoke hard to make it stick. We stepped into the hallway like people leaving a fight without having thrown the first punch. What now? Sean tugged at me, unsure. Now we're going to do what you didn't want to do, but the right way, calmly, I answered, guiding them. I know what you're going to say. Melissa shook her head, eyes wet, giving in. The following week, I sat with the two of them at the kitchen table and spoke first to take the weight off their backs. I know it hurts, but you told me you're ready, I said, careful. We're ready to press charges. Sean looked at Melissa. She looked back at him and nodded, firm. We already have your statements, the footage of the demolition, and the building department's confirmation that there was no permit, I said, lining it all up. We went to the police station and told everything from start to finish. The officer recorded every detail, watched the video of the gate, the wreckage, the crying, and Sean and Melissa's hands trying to hold on to what was left. I added the note from the fence and photos of the cut wire, and he assured us they would get inspectors involved. We left with the promise of a quiet operation at the site. A few weeks later, the phone rang before dawn, and I heard Skylar's voice, breathless. The operation's happening today, she said, panting. I'm on my way. Wait for me at the gate, I answered, dropping everything. I pulled up in front of the lot and saw the cruisers rolling through the gate. You can't just go in like that. The guard came running, arm raised, confused. We can. We have a warrant, an officer replied without raising his voice, assured. We went in together, me, Sean, Melissa, and Skylar, following the officer's path. In the back of the lot there was a warehouse with a padlock. Open it! The lead officer looked at another and said, direct. The other officer cut the lock, and the door groaned heavy. The smell hit us like old dust, stacks of identical boxes piled high, no invoices, nothing. This is big. An inspector opened one, wrote down numbers and whispered, tense. It matches the pattern of stolen cargo shipments from the last few months. An officer compared numbers and turned to the group, grave. A man working the job was pinned against the wall by the officers. He's the foreman on the site, one of them said flat. I did what I was told, the man said, voice cracking, scared. Who told you? The officer stepped in close without yelling, pressing. This was going to be a fake grocery up front, with the storage to hide the boxes until final transport. The man swallowed hard and confessed. Noted. The inspector recorded every word. Quick. They shut the site down on the spot. The inspector posted the notice on the warehouse door, a big sticker making it clear no one was to touch anything. The police seized everything. Are you seeing what I'm seeing? Sean turned to me like he wanted a nightmare translated. I am, I answered, fist clenched. They did this to our home to hide crime. Melissa gripped my arm until it hurt, outraged. The following weeks flew. I went back and forth between the ranch and town, carried documents, came back with updates, and each day felt like one more step up a ladder. One evening before sunset, an officer called me. "Show up tomorrow. We're about to lock in a piece of the puzzle," he said to the point. Next day, I was there when the officer came in with a folder and said, "As simply as you announced something big, the police put the puzzle together and arrested Deborah and Seth," he said straight. "How did it happen?" Sean clutched his cane with both hands, tense. "The cargo theft ring was big, and within the scheme they were known as a dangerous couple," the officer answered, serious. "I never wanted this for my daughter, but she made her choice." Melissa leaned back in her chair, breath caught between fear and relief. The investigation pulled messages and bank records. It was proven that right after the first meeting, Seth offered Thomas a large sum to drop your case. The officer went on, direct. "I put that man in front of us." Skylar covered her mouth, anger and shame tangled. "And I told you, and I'll say it again, it's not on the one who introduced him, it's on the one who sold out." I looked her in the eye and answered, firm. "The attorney was charged and ended up losing his law license," the officer finished, blunt. Days later, an official notice brought us to a room. A woman in a simple vest introduced herself. "I work with victims and restitution," she said, kind. "The funds frozen in Deborah and Seth's accounts were allocated to compensate the couple," she explained, matter of fact. "Does that pay for a piece of the life they broke?" Sean stood there not knowing what to do with his hands, vulnerable. "It doesn't pay for a life. It pays what we can measure, and it helps you start again," the woman answered, with a gentleness that didn't sugarcoat anything. "It's something," Melissa said, wiping away tears. "The whole neighborhood showed up when they heard justice was being done. People came with lumber, cement, tools, everyone wanting to help. I kept running between the ranch and town, and at night we gathered at Skylar's to eat and plan the next day. The house, once in ruins, turned into a job site full of life." Sean insisted on helping. Melissa found her smile again, and Skylar looked after everyone like a mother. We agreed to use the restitution money to finish the interiors and put up the gate. When the new roof set in place, Sean leaned his cane by the door. Melissa hugged me, and Skylar cried quietly. I looked at them and understood. That was justice, the house standing, hearts cleared, and a friendship that had become family. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, give it a like, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. See you in the next story.